Alright guys, what's up? Today I want to talk about my swim bait strategies that I utilize in the fall to really maximize on the opportunities that river smallmouth give us in the form of bite windows that come and go pretty quickly. So we are going to dive into a progression strategy that you can use as the aggressiveness of the fish changes throughout the day. And this is especially important in the fall because there are bite windows that are very real and very short. And if you're not there to take advantage of those windows, there's a chance that you're not actually going to have a really great day out on the water. So as the bite windows turn on and off throughout the day, and as the aggressiveness of the fish change based on the conditions, you're going to want to change your strategies with your swim baits as well. So we're going to talk about the changes that I make out on the water to adjust in real time to what the fish are telling me. So we're going to start this with talking about how I start my day, what swim baits I'm throwing when I first get out on the water early in the morning. One important thing to take into account in the fall is that you should be getting out there early in the morning, even if it's cold. I used to actually think that, it's cold, the water's gonna be chilly in the morning, it's not worth getting out there until the sun comes up, and I was half right about that. So in the fall, as soon as that sun gets up and it starts shining on the water, those fish turn on. Happened to us yesterday, happened to us today. Fish were crushing the surface. Like, we're talking 4 or 5 big smallmouth crushing the surface in bait that they were trying to pin. And all of that started as soon as the sun came up. And the air temps, low 30s. My buddy Jeff was out there throwing a topwater bait, caught some tanks on top when the air temps were 34 degrees, no more than that, but the fish were crashing. So first thing when you get out on the water in the fall, make sure you get out early when that sun gets up, but you should be thinking aggressive bait. So this is when I'm going to be throwing a bigger swim bait, something I can burn fast, something like the Z-Man Hercules in bright colors, because I'm not really worried about imitating anything. I'm worried about taking advantage of that bite window that happens first thing in the fall. Don't be afraid to throw something like a glide or a hard swim bait, an S-Waver here, or I really like the 6-inch Trace. Another bigger profile swim bait that I like is the Beast Coast Miyagi. Now this is only 4.5 inches, I believe, but it does have a lot bigger profile than a lot of the swim baits that I use. So throwing something like this first thing in the morning, taking advantage of those aggressive fish is going to be your best bet. But throughout the day, bite windows are going to open and close, and the bite is simply going to change. That early window is going to shut off, and you're going to have to work for fish for a while. It'll kick on later, but let's go into my next step in my strategy for swim baits during the fall. So once that first bite window kind of settles down and fish seem to gravitate more towards the bottom again, I don't want to be dragging the bottom just yet with a swim bait, but I do want to fish close to the bottom. And this is when I'm going to utilize like a round ball jig head, kind of like this Kitech tungsten here, or I also really like the Big Bite Baits swimmer jig head. On that jig head, I'm going to be throwing something that's a little bit louder in terms of its color. I really like the Z-Man minnows. I've started getting into these this year, but I like something with a chartreuse tail. In the past, I've also used a Big Bite Baits Suicide Shad in the small 3-inch version, and I've dyed the tail chartreuse on that. Something with a nice wide wag that's going to draw the attention of the fish, because they've stopped feeding so aggressively, but they haven't stopped eating altogether. So you shouldn't really have to work too hard for them, but this is kind of the next step to see if they're in that phase. So throwing a swim bait like that, slow rolling it above the bottom, pauses here and there, but not actually stopping it and dragging it. That's like the next phase of my swim bait strategy after that first bite window subsides a little bit. Okay, so I was throwing the swim bait that I showed you guys earlier, but I was not getting bit on that. So that told me that the bite window had either ended or the mood had shifted a little bit for whatever reason. You can still throw a swim bait in that situation. You just have to rig it a little bit differently. So what I switched up to is an X-Zone Lures Swammers, 3.5 inch, and then I have that on a 3/8 ounce spot remover jig head, and I was dragging it along the bottom on hard bottom and pausing it, popping it, reeling it here and there, but just picking it up, and then that fish was there. So when you're not getting bit on those swim baits or swim bait setups that require a straight retrieve and you're not letting them sit on the bottom for too long, then it's maybe time to opt for something that is going to sit on the bottom for a little bit longer. And this setup is perfect for that. Notice that that color is like a bluish green. I like that color a lot this time of year, but you can also switch between swim baits in terms of their tails, like a more aggressive kick or a less aggressive kick. So I'm starting out more aggressive, right, and working my way back down. So that's generally my strategy with swim baits when I'm throwing it this time of year, because day by day the mood of the fish is going to change, and then you have to adapt your presentations to that mood. So let's go see if we can catch a few more in that spot. So with this setup, the key is to maintain that bottom contact. You can still reel it, but you want it bumping into stuff. And having it on that spot remover stand-up jig head also gives you the opportunity to fish it more like a jig and let it sit there. I tend to be more on the move it at first in terms of strategy, and then if I'm still not getting bit, then I'll kill it, drag it, pop it. That's the fish I marked right there for sure. Right over a rock. There were two fish sitting right on a rock. I marked them both. Another one there. Not a big one, but I think we've got a little something figured out, don't we? Thought that was a bite. That's a tank. So guys, that fish is a really good example of why I use this setup and why I use the short swim bait, because I got short striked on that exact same cast and I was still working it down through some deeper rock nice and slow, and that time he came up and got it, and that was a much bigger fish. So when the bite slows down, this is when I really want to mimic something that's real. You can do this with any swim bait that I've mentioned previously. You just want to maybe shift your swim bait choice based on the mood of the fish. If they're still hitting it pretty aggressively when you're dragging that spot remover on the bottom, then by all means use an aggressive tail wag, get their attention. But if we need to shift more subtle, we're gonna go something like a Largo shad, or I've got one more that I think you guys will like. All right, so everybody loves the Kitech. Yes, they break up easily, but this Kitech 3.3 in perch gets the job done for me. I especially like them in cold water. I'm not sure what the cold water does to the tail. If it lessens the action a little bit, I'm sure that's the case with all swim baits, but I really like this. This gets bites for me when the going gets tough. That is for sure. Dump. The old swim bait, baby. Smacked it hard. I don't think it's very big. Oh, pretty nice. Man, just beautiful fish. Pretty early on into the cast, I like moved it and then it was just donk. Well, some of them. Oh, there's another one. Dude, they're thrashing it hard. I'm really just starting and stopping it. Not really dragging it. But if they do turn down those swim baits, then that's when I'm gonna go to phase 4. This is like when nothing else is working and I feel like I need to dead stick a bait or use a bait that has no action. I'm going to use a flat jig head like this. And at this point, I don't even know that it's a swim bait head. I'm pretty sure this is made by Poor Boy Baits, but this is a flat jig head. And I'm going to throw a goby imitation on that doesn't even have a tail that flaps. There are goby baits out there by Grumpy's. They're called Goliath gobies. Those are going to be what I use on something like this. So I'm going to show you those goby baits. These are going to be what I use when the bite really shuts down. And this is a do nothing bait. That's what I call it. I'm just gonna let this sit on the bottom. I'm gonna slow drag it. I'm mostly gonna dead stick it, but look at that tail, it's not moving. This is mostly about profile and just letting it sit there in front of a fish. So again, as I mentioned previously, we wanna be confident that the fish are there when we're utilizing this strategy. We're probably not gonna wanna use this when we're covering water, looking for new fish in the fall. But if we have a transition spot, a winter area where we know the fish are, similar to what I'm fishing today, then I'm gonna be a lot more confident in a bait that I can throw out and let sit there. So I know this technically maybe isn't a swim bait, but this is the last of my swim bait strategy. This is my last ditch effort to catch any fish still hanging around willing to bite. All right guys, that is gonna be it for my swim bait strategies. I'm gonna go utilize these strategies right now, try to catch some fish that I've for the most part turned off since this morning, but it's been a super fun day. Hopefully you guys can utilize this, but again, let's view this as a progression, right? We move from one stage to the next based on those bite windows. So as fish are super aggressive in the morning, we want to take advantage of that, and as they grow less aggressive, then we want to shift our strategy. But there are times where the fish are going to fire back up and you may want to ditch a swim bait altogether, throw a crankbait, but when you catch a few fish on that, then switch back over to the jerk bait so that you can clean up the ones that are conditioned or just aren't in the mood to bite that fast swimming crankbait. So get out there on the river, go fish, have fun, catch some giant smallies. See ya.